Okay, and what's the next one? Grandchildren. Man, this one is tough. So first, Dr. Terry Apter, I'm probably saying her name wrong, but Dr. Terry Apter, she's a psychologist, and she says that the biggest fear that grandparents have is that they're going to be excluded from their grandchildren. And as you know, when people operate in fear, they start to behave rather poorly. Another researcher says, Dr. Sarah Morman, says that when kids grow up having an emotional connection with their grandparents, that they are less likely to experience depression as an adult. On the flip side, she says that grandparents who babysit their grandchildren live longer. So there are studies here showing us the benefit that is having a close relationship with their grandparents. I also love studies that talk about having this different generational gap. And children, I really like my church and that it sets up an atmosphere where I have mentors who are 50, 60, 70 years old, people that I look up to, people that I pray with, people that I wrestle with, people that I share my plans with, and then I engage a lot with the teenagers and the younger kids. And by doing this, I have a variety of different people and different generations who are going to come together to give me different advice. And so me and Renee, something that is so important for me and Renee, and maybe it's because my grandparents on my mother's side, I never got to meet them. My grandmother died of breast cancer. My grandfather, unfortunately, was killed. And on my dad's side of the family, they're still very much alive, but they live in Brazil, so we're not very close. And Renee's grandparents, he's closer to them because he spent more time in Brazil with them. But after he moved to America, again, we're not as close as we wish we were. And so something that's important for Renee and I is that our boys, River and Reed, have a relationship, a great relationship, not only with my parents, but his parents. We think that's important. So how can we navigate this situation? How can we offer reassurance saying, hey, we want you guys to be a huge part of River and Reed's life, but at the same time, how can we establish boundaries with the grandparents? So I'm going to give you an example. Now, Renee and I, we are the ultimate decision makers in River and Reed's life. We are their parents. Now, we're going to make decisions, and we are well aware of this. We are going to make decisions that his parents and my parents, they might not necessarily agree with those decisions. However, we don't need their agreement. We just need their respect. So Renee and I have decided that we are going to raise our boys, and again, you don't have to agree with it either, on a whole food plant-based diet. We like what Michael Pollan says, and he says, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Now, luckily for us, both of our parents, right, parents on either side, they like this. They agree with it. My mom's a vegetarian. My dad eats the occasional meat, and Renee's mom and dad, they're very health conscious. Fun fact, Renee's brother, I don't want to go on a rant here, but I think it's pretty amazing. Renee's brother, when he was younger, he actually had leukemia and was healed just with food, just with plants. Now, again, you don't need to agree with it. This is what happened. This is what happened for him. This was their reality. And so we very much believe in the food approach. Let food be thy medicine, right? And so Renee's mother, her way of loving us is through food. And so whenever you go to Renee's parents' house, right, whenever I go to my in-laws' house, certainly the words that will come out of my mother-in-law's mouth will be like, you guys all look skinny and you guys all look hungry. And so she is continuously trying to feed River and Reed. Now, I don't care what she gives them as long as it falls under the boundaries that we have set. You can give them anything you want as long as it's whole food, plant-based. So Saturday they came over and she made them brown rice and tomatoes and there was calamari and she just made them a delicious meal within the boundaries that we set. But here's the next thing. When you establish boundaries, you also need to be willing to enforce those boundaries. And you're not going to do that if you have not settled this with your husband. Now, you need to figure out for yourself and for your family what are principles and what are preferences. So the way that the boys eat for us, it's a principle thing. So we're not going to be flexible on that. However, we are flexible with preferences. So again, as I said, luckily for us, our parents and in-laws, they're all in agreement. But I had a situation where a client, she wanted her son to eat healthier. He was a little overweight, and the doctors recommended, lowering the sugar intake. But the problem was that mom and then mother-in-law would babysit the boy. And mother-in-law continuously kept giving the boy things that he was not supposed to eat. And it was the donuts, and it was the cupcakes, and it was the ice cream, and mom was getting frustrated and frustrated and frustrated. She established the boundary, but she was not willing to enforce the boundaries. Mom, quite honestly, was a pushover. And so grandma, right, her mother-in-law, walked all over her. And so now we were helping mom establish this boundary and enforce this boundary. And what do you guys think happened? Oh, grandma threw a fit. She threw a tantrum. She was so upset. She didn't come by for a week and then a month, and she couldn't believe it. She threw a tantrum. Now, if you have a young child, 2, 3 years old, imagine your child gets upset and he starts throwing a tantrum in Target, and then you reinforce that negative behavior with a lollipop. What's going to happen? He's going to throw another tantrum, right? He's going to associate, if I throw a tantrum, I get a lollipop. And as hard as it was, the client was willing to establish this, enforce this boundary. Grandma didn't like it, right? Her mother-in-law didn't like it. She stayed away for a little bit, but then she came around. And I know that it might be the case where you put distance between you and your in-laws. But boundaries are positive. Boundaries are good things. Of course, you want to say it with kindness and patience. You need to allow people to have a learning curve. And again, we're not looking for agreement. We are just looking for respect. You and your husband need to make decisions and then be willing to establish boundaries and enforce these boundaries, all the while offering reassurance that you want grandparents, that you want in-laws to be very much a part of their lives.